Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. How are you guys doing? Hanging in there? Good. Well, today we are going to do our second round of videos, but this one's for science, and this is video number 1. We will be doing a second video next week, and depending on how long you guys are at home, these might continue on and on. But nevertheless, what we're going to do is continue on in our book. So let's look at what we just learned last week. So you're going to notice that in our science class, we're going to have something that happens over and over again, and that's where we learn about new things and then try to break them up into groups. So if you remember back to science lesson number 1, we had a bunch of different things that we looked at. We had plants, we had animals, and then we also had mushrooms and fungus, which are known as our decomposers. So we took living things and we broke them up into 3 groups. Then on week 2, we looked specifically at our plants, and we did that last week. If you remember last week, I brought a bunch of plants into school and we looked at the parts of the plants, like the leaves, the flowers, the stems. And how we decided to break those up into groups is not by whether or not it makes fruit or vegetables, but the best way was to divide it based on whether or not it had flowers or not. After breaking our living things up into groups, we then looked at our plants, and we decided that there are flowering or plants that produce flowers or non-flowering plants. Now, we found that only a few plants don't have flowers. Those are plants like ferns or moss, which don't produce flowers. We also had a bunch of other plants like bananas, mulberry, rosemary. All of these plants had flowers. There's plenty more than that you could probably think of, like sunflowers, roses, daisies, daffodils, dandelions. So many plants are flowering. So if you guessed that this is the group that we're now going to make more groups for, you are correct. We're going to take a look at flowering plants today. And we're going to try to see if we can break them up into more categories. Much like last week, we're going to be looking at only flowering plants. And we're going to be looking at the same things, such as its actual flower, stems, roots, leaves, and then this time we're going to talk a little bit about the seeds. Now, scientists have gotten together, and over the years, they've broken flowering plants up into 2 groups, 2 major groups. We have, from our biologists, 2 different categories. We have monocots, and then we also have dicots. What do these words mean? Today, we're actually going to explore the different characteristics or things that make them different between the 2 of them. Now, the way you say this word is monocot, monocots, and then dicots, dicots. They're actually made from bigger words, monocotyledons and dicotyledons. It's a really hard word. Even I have a hard time saying them. So for the purposes of this video and you guys and your tests, just use the words monocots and dicots. That way it'll be easier for us to remember. So for today, what we're actually going to do is I'm actually going to go outside and look at some of these different plants. And I'm just going to explain to you the differences between these 2. Now, normally we would do an experiment, but you guys are not here and I don't want to do it alone. So we're just simply going to go outside and look, okay? All right, guys, so what we're gonna do is look at the different parts of a plant, just like we did in the last experiment. We're gonna be looking at the stems, the leaves, the flowers, the roots. So let's look at this dicot. You see how many flowers, how many flower petals there are on this? Yeah, there's 5. Dicots have multiples of 4 and 5 flower petals, okay? So this has 5, the next one up would be 10, or it would be 4, 8, and so on, okay? So this one has a multiple of 5. So that's the flower, and if you guys wanna see the flower, this is a dicot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Another thing that we can look at on a dicot is the leaf. The leaf itself, its veins don't go straight up and down or parallel. They actually spider out like a web, like a spider web. An example of a monocot's leaf would be like a bamboo leaf. It goes straight up and down. It's one single part in the middle and none of the lines cross each other. We're at Teacher Skylar's house. We decided to take a little bit of a field trip today because I found out that the school doesn't have many plants that have flowers at the moment. So what I did is I brought you guys to my house so I could show you some of the monocots and dicots. If you look around my garden, I have some of the plants you guys might recognize. There's our fern, there's the second fern. Here is the jasmine plant, the mulberry plant, the banana plant, and then right here is our rosemary plant, which one of them didn't survive, you guys. That's okay. Maybe we can get this one to keep going. So, we're here at my house today. I have a couple plants that I want to show you. One is very much a monocot, and the other one is very much a dicot. So we're going to look at the differences between the two so you can learn the differences between monocot and dicot. Here we go. So right away, I want to say that this is a monocot and this is a dicot. They both have flowers and they both have leaves, stems, roots, and they came from seeds. So let's look at flowers first. Monocots have multiples of 3. When I say multiples, I mean 3, 6, 9, and then so on. So these are multiples of 3. So let's look at the monocot. If you look closely, you can see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So it's multiples of 3, and there's 2 3s. Where the dicot has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flower petals. Now, monocots have either 4 or 5, multiples of 4 or 5. So it can be 4, 5, 8, or 10, and sometimes even more. So those are the differences between a dicot and a monocot. Just the flowers though. Now for the leaves of a plant, I kind of want to show you plants that we've already looked at before. So let's look at the banana plant. The banana plant has these giant leaves. And if you look really closely, you can see that the stems inside of the leaves don't actually cross each other. Where, if you go to our mulberry plant, look at the leaves. Each one of them is not straight. They're not parallel. So they go out, they branch, and they go in all different directions. Where the banana plant has these straight lines in them. One center line, and then little ones that go out, but they never cross. So, with our monocot and dicot plants, our monocot looks something like this. None of the stems within the leaf actually cross each other. Dicot, if you look real closely, they actually cross each other. Okay, students, so we've looked at the flowers, we've looked at the leaves. What else did we look at last week that we might look at this week to see between the monocots and the dicots? Well, we have flowers, we have leaves, we also have our stems, roots, and seeds. So now we're going to take a look at those. Okay, so for the stems, what I did is I cut a banana stem, and I want you to look really closely at the inside. It's really squishy in the center, but as you get to the outside, it's a little harder. Banana is a little more squishy than most. Banana stem, the vascular bundles are closer to the outside of the stem rather than the center. Where if you look at something like mulberry, the vascular bundles are all throughout the stem. And that makes it really hard. All right guys, so now what we're gonna do is look at the roots. The roots of our dicot, it's gonna look a lot like this, where the stems go out in all different directions. Where if you look at our monocot, and that's this one, it's actually one giant stem with a bunch of them coming off. So this all connects. You can't see it here because it's really, really hard, but there's one center stem and all of these come off of that, where this kind of shoots out in all different directions. Okay guys, so let's review monocots and dicots. What I want you to do is please open your blue books and take some of these notes, because these sort of questions will be on the test, okay? So go ahead and open your blue books now and try writing down some of these notes. What do we know about the flowers on monocots? Well, monocots have multiples of 3 flowers. So what that means is they have multiples of 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, and so on. Anything that divides by 3, that is classified as a monocot, okay? What about the flowers on dicots? That is going to be multiples of 4 or 5. So it either has 4 or 8 or 12, or it has 5, 10, 15, even 20. So that would be a dicot. So what about our leaves on the monocots? Well, monocots have leaves where they run parallel. They never cross, okay? There's one in the middle and then other ones that go right beside it. They never cross. They never go into each other and they never cross. Okay, so that's a monocot. Dicots are much like our mulberry plants or our jasmine, where the veins inside of the leaves actually kind of go all over the place. They cross, they run into each other, and they spider out like a spider web. That is a dicot. Okay, so make sure you write parallel veins, and parallel just means next to each other, never crosses. Parallel veins for our monocots, and make sure you write down net vein, okay? So net vein looks like a spider web. It kind of goes all over the place. What about our stems? Well, for monocots, like our banana leaves, they're hard on the outside, but squishy on the inside. Those are monocots. Dicots look a lot like wood. They're hard all the way through, and they crack when you bend them, rather than bend or squish, okay? So, monocot is squishy, dicot is hard like wood. In your notes for monocots, stems, they're hard outside, soft inside. Dicots, hard inside and out. Make sure you write that in your notes. Let's take a look at roots. What do we remember about the roots of monocots? Well, monocots have taproots, which means it's one giant root, and from that, smaller ones grow. Monocots have roots that kind of look like bushes. They go everywhere. They're all intertwined, they're mixed, they're tangled. That's what dicot roots look like. Monocot, one with small roots coming off of it. Dicots are just, they go everywhere. Okay, so for your notes for monocots, the correct term is taproot. And taproot, again, is just one root with small roots coming off of it. For the dicots, to make it easy, I'm just going to write bushy, which means it's like a bush underground. So go ahead and write these in your notes. The reason that these guys have two different names, mono and di, mono means one, di means two. This is talking mainly about the seeds. If you look at the seeds of a monocot, you're gonna see that it kind of holds together as one, and it only has one cotyledon. You don't need to remember that, but just know that the cotyledons live within the seeds. The monocots have one, and the dicots have two. Think about dicots as a pea, or something like a cashew or an acorn. If you take the seed, it easily breaks into two, and there's now two portions to that seed. That's gonna be things like acorns, things like cashews, peanuts, or even peas. Monocots are gonna be something like corn. If you break corn in half, it's just gonna fall apart into pieces. It will not turn into two. Onions, same thing, it's just one. Coconut, if you break it, it shatters. Same thing with a grass seed. It's just one unit. It kind of looks something like this. Dicots look like this. If you split it, it splits easily into two halves. So remember, 2 for dicot, 1 for monocot. Easy, right? So this is gonna wrap up our science video number 1. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you soon.